It's tax season here in America, which means it's time for everyone to procrastinate and complain about how complicated they are. They're really not that complicated, but there are people out there with a vested interest in making you think that they are, whether it's a politician who wants to use simplifying the tax code as a campaign slogan, or a company who wants to sell you their services and doing them for you. If you have a basic understanding of high school algebra, you already know more than you need to in order to understand taxes. We do make them needlessly complicated here in America, so for any of you international viewers, feel free to compare your system to ours. But still, they're not that complicated. Let's start with your paycheck. Feel free to tell me how much you make down below and we can get started. Okay, well, since you're apparently not going to participate, we're going to have to make up an example. Let's start with this guy. He's single and makes $30,000 a year.
Rainer here.
That's about twice minimum wage. Okay, so I rounded down in order to make the numbers easier to deal with. Sue me.
Please don't sue me.
Anyway, it's pretty close to the average individual income here in America. He gets paid twice a month, which comes out to $12.50 each paycheck.
Right on.
But as you probably all know, that's not how much he ends up with. In Australia, when they hire you and tell you that you make $30,000 a year, that's how much you make. That's your take-home pay. They figure in how much taxes get taken out and they don't even tell you about it. How awesome would that be instead of it being a mystery until your first paycheck? Anyway, let's break down what happens to that paycheck. First, 6.2% comes out for Social Security. For those of you not in the United States, that's the mandatory socialized retirement program that everyone pays into, but you only reap the full benefit of once you turn 67. That comes out to $77.50. Next, 1.45% gets taken out for Medicare. For those of you not in the United States, that's the mandatory socialized healthcare program that everyone pays into, but you don't receive the full benefit of until you turn 65. Apparently only old people get socialism here in America. That comes out to be $18.13. These two together are called FICA taxes, and the government just takes it and you never see it again. Well, unless you become old enough, I guess. The next bit to come out of your paycheck is income tax, the part that most people do incorrectly. We're gonna ignore state income tax and just focus on federal because I don't want to make 43 different versions of this video. The part of your paycheck that goes towards income tax is called the federal income tax withholding. A small portion of each paycheck is withheld, and at the end of the year you figure out whether you owe more or more commonly get a refund. So how are people messing this up? Because how much goes towards your withholding depends on your income, your filing status, and how many allowances you claim. This is called a W-4. You filled it out when you started your job. Most people don't even read it and just put 0. And this is the worst possible answer. This form is asking how many people this income is meant to support. Putting 0 means nobody. So the government will take the maximum possible amount. People like to claim 0 because it gives them a bigger refund. You're not getting a refund because of a defective product or shoddy service. It's because you overpaid. But we'll get to that in a moment. This guy claims 0, so combining that with his income and crippling loneliness, the government takes 12.3%, which comes out to $153.70. That number is figured out by your employer using a really complicated set of tables that takes all three of those identifiers into account. I wish I could tell you some sort of concrete number, but it changes for literally everyone. So let's look at someone who works at the exact same job for the exact same pay, but actually read his W-4.
Ad Victoriam.
Enter 1 for yourself if no one else can claim you as a dependent. Enter 1 if you're single and only have one job. Or if you're married or have a second job, okay, that doesn't apply. Spouse, nope. Dependents, nope. Head of child, blah, 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 whatever. 2. He claims 2, so he gets the same $1,250 paycheck, $77.50 out for Social Security, $18.13 out for Medicare, but his withholding is different, $103.08, only 8.3%. That's a difference of $50.62 per paycheck. The key here is that since they both make the same amount and they both have the same depressing life circumstances, they both owe the same amount at the end of the year. But we'll get to how we figure that out in a moment. For now, just take my word for it that this guy gets a $1,215.05 refund at the end of the year, and this guy gets a 17-cent refund. Though, since we round to the nearest dollar, no refund. This is usually the point where the guy who claimed 0 celebrates his gift from the government and laughs at the guy who claimed 2 for doing his taxes wrong. But did he? He already has all of that money in the bank, so it actually evens out. That guy just has a more accurate withholding allowance, which lets him keep more of his own money each paycheck. So read your W-4, don't just put 0, and if you already work somewhere, ask for a new W-4. Say this was a cell phone bill and you owed $60 a month, but you decide to play it safe and pay $70 a month, so you get a $120 refund at the end of the year. You would seriously reconsider how much you're paying each month. At least, I hope you would. Your refund is not a gift from the government, and you're not sticking it to anyone by getting a refund. You're getting it because you're overpaying. No, you can't tell your employer to take out nothing for income tax, despite what any sovereign citizen might tell you. The government totally has the power to tax personal income. There's also a number of YouTube videos that tell you how to get out of paying taxes by claiming 9 or 10. Unless you're John and Kate plus 8, don't do that. You can actually claim more than 9 or 10, but at that point you're just being a pain to your employer, not the government. It's a logarithmic function. You'll get infinitely close to 0, but you'll never actually get to 0. If you don't pay your income taxes, they'll eventually send someone with a gun to your house. And most likely you're gonna get everything you paid in taxes back anyway, so it's just not worth it. Pay your taxes. Let's figure out how much this guy owes. And here's where we're gonna dispel a few more myths. We use a progressive tax system here in America, which means the more money you make, the more that money is taxed. Actually, most countries use this system. It's a common misconception that if you make this much money, you're taxed at this rate, but if you make $1 more, all of your money is taxed at a higher rate, which just isn't true. So let's take a look at how this works. We're gonna be working with the 2017 bracket since that's what you'll be filing under this year. Near the end, I'll talk about the 2018 changes. Like the other guy, he's single and makes $30,000 a year. The first $9,325 is taxed at 10%. So of that, he owes $932.50. The remaining $20,675 is taxed at 15%, coming out to $3,101.25. So in total, he owes $4,033.75. Well, that wasn't a very good example. He only crosses 2 brackets. All right, well, let's look at his boss.
One enclave, one America.
Who is also single but makes $100,000 a year. Again, the first $9,325 is taxed at 10%. The 15% bracket goes up to $37,950, which means only $28,625 of his income is taxed at that rate. The next bracket goes up to $91,900 and is taxed at 25%. And his final $8,100 is taxed at 28%. His total tax bill is $20,981.75. So even though his income falls into the 28% bracket, not all of his income is taxed at that rate. 28% is what is called his top marginal tax rate, while his effective tax rate is only 20.98%. There are other proposed tax systems like the regressive system, which means the more money you make, the less that money is taxed, which obviously disproportionately benefits the rich, which is why no country on earth uses it. And then there is the flat tax, which means that all income is taxed at the same rate, which certainly sounds fair, which is why every few years someone tries to push for it. But let's look at it in practice. In order for a flat tax to work, it would have to be high enough that the government wouldn't lose any revenue. But in order to keep that same level of revenue, it would have to be something like 36%, which is insane. So let's use a number that has been proposed before. 18%. This guy would see his taxes go up, and this guy would see his taxes go down. Just like the regressive system, it disproportionately helps the wealthy. Imagine if he was making millions or even billions of dollars. In 2012, a presidential candidate suggested a 999 plan, which included a 9% flat income tax, which is excessively low, but also introduced a new 9% national sales tax. So effectively, your federal taxes would be 18% total. In the US, sales tax is a state and local consumption tax only on certain goods. Essential items like food are not taxed, but for frivolous items like cars, TVs, or tampons, things get a little messy. Gross.
Tampons should not be taxed.
Since it's state and local, it changes from city to city, but on average, it's 7%. Adding a 9% national sales tax would suddenly mean that everything costs 16% more than what it says on the price tag. In Ireland, it's called the value added tax, or VAT, and it's 23% nationwide. But you wouldn't know it because the tax is figured into the price tag. It's not a surprise once you get to the register. Why do we have to go and make things Speaking of complicated, while I was figuring out the tax brackets, I'm sure some of you were typing out furious comments about how I forgot about deductions, exemptions, and credits. I didn't forget it, it said that in the bottom right. Let's explain it now. Let's just focus on this guy. But since he's single, he doesn't really qualify for any of the fun stuff. So let's complicate things by giving him custody of one child. Let's not make him married though, life's hard enough as it is. But since he now has a dependent, he gets to file as head of household, so the brackets get all messed up. Leave it to a kid to make a mess of things. The first $13,350 is taxed at 10%, and the remaining $16,650 is taxed at 15%. The first deduction he is going to take is the standard deduction, which for head of household is $9,350. He could itemize, which means individually deducting things like state income tax, charitable donations, and even things like sales tax, but for most people, almost always, the standard deduction is higher. Unless you have some incredibly complicated tax situation or make an enormous amount of money, which most of you don't, just take the standard deduction. Then he is going to claim two personal exemptions, one for himself and one for his child, totaling $8,100. These two numbers, the standard deduction and personal exemptions, are subtracted from his overall income of $30,000, meaning he is only taxed on $12,550. It would be nice if we lived in a country where they just said your first however many dollars weren't taxed. That system would make so much more sense. But as far as I know, no such country exists, so we're left with having to do math. So that's it, his income only falls into the 10% bracket, so he owes $1,255. But that's not the entire story, because while deductions reduce the amount of income that you're taxed on, credits reduce the amount of taxes you owe. There are all sorts of credits, like if you bought an electric car or installed solar panels on your house, but we're just going to focus on the most popular two. The child tax credit is just $1,000 per child. Nice and easy. Now he only owes $255. Then there is the earned income credit, which is complicated because it scales depending on income. It's not a case of if you make below a certain amount you get the credit, but if you make above it, you don't. So if you've ever thought to yourself, dang, if I just made $100 less, I would have gotten that credit. If you're that close to the line, the credit is worth single digits. But for this guy, it's $1,536, which means on top of getting back all of his federal income tax withholding from his paychecks throughout the year, the government owes him an additional $1,281. This is why an estimated 45% of Americans pay no federal income tax, because of the deductions and credits from having kids and stuff. But since we're still dealing with 2017, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the opposite of credits, penalties. If you didn't have health insurance in 2017, you owe the government an additional $695 per person. Either you owe in addition to your taxes, or it gets taken out of your refund. But that penalty is going away in 2019 thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I promised I would talk about the 2018 changes, so here we go. Let's start with this guy, single, making $30,000 a year. He got a $6,350 standard deduction and $4,050 personal exemption and no credits. So he owes $2,473.75, an effective tax rate of 8.25%. The brackets shift a little bit and his top bracket is now only 12%, but the biggest change is the near doubling of the standard deduction to $12,000. However, this is completely offset by the fact that the new plan completely eliminates personal exemptions. So in the end, he now owes $1,969.50, a savings of $504.25. Now for the rich guy. In 2017, he owed $18,138.50. Again, his standard deduction and personal exemption are rolled into one standard deduction totaling $12,000. And the brackets shift a bit again. His top bracket is now only 24% and his tax burden falls to $15,409.50, a reduction of $2,729. And lastly, the complicated guy, earning $30,000 with one child as head of household. In 2017, he got a standard deduction and two personal exemptions totaling $17,450. Those have been bundled together for a standard deduction of $18,000. The child tax credit doubles to $2,000 and the earned income credit creeps up slightly to $1,662. So he will now get a refund of $2,462. almost double what he got for 2017. The 2018 plan helps almost everyone. It helps some people a lot more than others, but still most everyone. At times it seems like our system is incredibly confusing when compared to others, and sometimes it seems like it's that way on purpose. But it isn't that confusing. I explained it to you in about 15 minutes or so. Odds are that most of you are completely capable of doing your own taxes. You don't need to pay someone else. You can either do them with pencil and paper, or you can use something like TurboTax. Either way, you can still do them yourself. And before you feel compelled to ask me a question about your specific tax situation down below, just remember, I'm playing around with Funko Pops and Monopoly money. Don't ask me. You really should know better. Hey, that's the... So what are you gonna do with your refund? Did you know I have a Patreon? Because I have a Patreon. If you'd like to see more videos like this, consider donating $1 or $2, and don't forget to credit that subscribe button. Also make sure to follow me on Twitter and Facebook, and join us on the subreddit.